Thank you. This is such an immense honor. First, I've never had an organ play before I stepped onto a stage before. Truly, I've admired this festival from afar for many years, and what the people behind this festival do is nothing short of a miracle as far as I'm concerned. They're critics in their daily life, and they decide to throw a festival is just, it's mind-boggling to me, and it's a phenomenal honor to be able to show this movie with you tonight as the closing night film. It truly is. I always say this before screenings. This is a film that you may have read about. There deals a little bit with the paranormal. It's not a horror film, so if you're expecting that, just want to let you know to put that aside right now and just open yourself up for something different. It's also got the wonderful Jim Gaffigan, and you will see a different side of him in this film tonight. It's definitely not a comedy, but we'll probably laugh quite a bit during the Q&A. Anyway, I just hope you are open to the film, and thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to talking with you about it afterwards. And thank you.
And be sure to turn off your cell phones. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thanks for sticking around, everybody. I guess you liked that, yes? Sounds like you did. All right, let's bring our guests up. Let's bring Paul up first, the director. Let's bring producer Kelly Williams up. And the star of the film, Mr. Jim Gaffigan.
I love the organ, play ball.
Let's just start at the beginning. Where did this idea come from? This is such a unique and beautiful idea, and it's certainly unique and beautiful in terms of a ghost story, as it were. Just talk about where the idea started from.
Yeah, it came from a lot of different places, honestly. I'd gone through some changes in my life and some loss in my life, and I think that was definitely not a death necessarily, but some loss, and that was emotionally informing kind of where I was. And around that time, I was driving through Southwest Virginia, and sometimes I'll tune the radio to like AM radio station, and just to hear what kinds of crazy stuff is being talked about. And there was a woman, a paranormal investigator, being interviewed on the radio, and I was only in range for like 5 minutes of hearing that, and I was like, oh, this is a really interesting character. And so started working from that, and it just it sat with me for a while, but then when I started writing, it came pretty quickly.
I love the idea that she's at a point where she's still doing the work and doing the radio, but she's a little bit over if there was any glamour or any excitement about having this ability, she's over it. Like, it's just something she does now. Was that sort of deliberate, or was it, how did you want her to?
Yeah, I think that that's part of where she is in her life, and I think that a lot of us, no matter what kind of field we're in, it's not that we're over. It's an immense privilege to be a filmmaker, and it's an immense privilege to be sitting up here and to talk about this film. But there are these days where it's a grind, and it's just a job. And for her, it's not even a job. It's just like this thing that, there's a sense of disillusionment, I think.
Every year, I feel like, and every year I go to Sundance, there's always one, maybe two actors that are kind of the belle of the ball that have multiple films. I remember one year where I couldn't turn a corner without seeing like a Leah Shawkat somewhere. Like she was just, and this year you were that Belle. you were in 3
Very
movies.
feminine.
Yes. You were in, we played One Them That Follow yesterday, and then you were in Troop Zero, and this, and you've sort of, especially in the last couple of years, amassed this really wonderful filmography of mostly serious roles. Is this kind of the thing that excites you in your career right now, that you can sort of get to explore the?
Well, I think it's they're the best scripts that I've been sent, and definitely the most complex and rewarding stories. And as a character, you want to play this person. And look, I enjoy comedy. It's definitely, being a stand-up comedian is who I am. But I think that there's also something very rewarding about not relieving the tension in the situation, which is what I think dramatic roles allow you to just sit there and just, allow you and the audience to suffer.
I'm curious because when you do your stand-up, it's a one-man show. You're the guy. You're doing the writing, the phrasing. Every single nuance is on you. And here, you are forced to collaborate, and you have to play off other people. Did that take a little getting used to?
Well, it's, collaborating is, I collaborate with my wife in everything I do. Or I essentially do what she tells me to do. But what I love about acting is also being that participant in this larger idea. And I had my own show, so I also, having been on the other side, I understand the value of being a good soldier and like showing up prepared and maybe asking a question or two, but serving the larger idea of the director or the scene or even the moment, so I love that opportunity of kind of, and also I have kids, so I see them pretend, and I want to do that too.
Dress up and be somebody else, yeah. I noticed there's a couple names in your lineup of producers that are familiar. David Lowery being the key one, and Eric said at the beginning, we played a ghost story here a couple of years ago. And Elizabeth Moss, maybe Kelly, can you tell us what different producers did in the...
All sorts of things.
Yeah.
Wow, a direct question to the producer, thanks.
Yeah.
No, I don't, we're just, we worked with the Sailor Bear guys, which is David Lowery and James Johnson and Toby Halbrooks, and we're all really old friends from Texas. So it was kind of like this team of Texas producers and their friend Lizzie, who, came together to help Paul make this film. We were all old friends with Paul and knew Paul through different channels. Very strange, and it was just like, it was kind of like our version of the Avengers, I guess, to come together and put the movie together. It was such a great script, it was such a great script to read. It was something we had been trying to make. James had been trying to make it long before,
About a year
Elizabeth
before
got
you-
involved, and
before
then I
you.
came on. Yeah.
Yeah, Lizzie got involved. She had just finished producing the first year, and obviously starring in the first year of Handmaid's Tale. And she was doing a day, I think it was a day cameo on Old Man the Gun. And she was telling James how much she loved the producing aspect. He was like, oh, if you really want to get your hands dirty producing, you should do, you should do a movie, with us. And that's how she read the script. She was like, I want to be involved. And she was how we reached out to you, or in part.
Yeah. I had kind of a nice run of a bunch of roles, and there's only so many times you can turn to the mother of 5 children and say, I'm leaving. So, but I love the script, and but it was one of those things where I had been gone so much, and then I got an email from Lizzie. That's what I call her. No, I still call her Elizabeth. These guys call her Lizzie, and I'm like, you mean Elizabeth Moss? I'm just too afraid. Like she came to a show in Toronto, and I'm like, I'll still call you Elizabeth. But she was she wrote this really nice letter, and she, Marin, she had just spoke so highly of Marin, and by the way, Marin she's amazing. She's so talented, and so that was, I love to work, but it was really kind of, I think that was the deciding factor, where I was like, all right, I'm getting this email from Lizzie Elizabeth Moss. So it definitely had an influence where even my wife, who is a writer and producer, was like, all right, Elizabeth Moss tells you to do this. Your films very often, the sense of place seems very key. I've heard it referred to as regional films. Like they actually, and to make, this was in Tennessee, but I don't know anything about Tennessee, but tell me, in this film, just tell me about the importance of the place and what was unique about this place that maybe we don't even realize that we're seeing here.
Yeah, so I live in Tennessee, and I write, when you're writing a script, you could write a novel and say like, oh, it happens in a house, and never even describe the house, but you have to, or the landscape, but you have to do that in a film. And for me, when I'm writing a script, I'm always imagining some specific place, a specific house, or I certainly was with the farmhouse, and those farmhouses are all over the place in East Tennessee, and definitely the stuff with the Smokies. That is 45 minutes from where I live, and it's just a place that's really special, I think, and it's part of the feeling. The place informs feeling, and as much as it informs story, and I think that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Jim, you are following the tradition of there are a handful of really great comedians that then turn into more serious acting, and I'm just wondering if there's any in particular that you have admired, especially that you sort of look to and go, yeah, I'd like to sort of do what that person did.
Well, I always have felt like I've always tried to get acting roles. It just took me 30 years. It's always been, there have been comedians that act, and then there are comedians that don't see they don't have the passion behind it. So I don't know. Maybe it's out of left field, but I think like Peter Sellers is really one of those guys where it's you can kind of get into a character and maybe it ends up being funny, but I don't really I've always felt like I've had a split personality of the acting roles. Maybe the comedy's held back some opportunities because there is kind of this perception that comedians don't act or don't have an interest in it, which is based on some reality. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. Anyway, I'm a great guy.
No, I was just gonna say, one thing that's, Jim always jokes like this is like the movie that he got because Zach Galifianakis didn't get it. But I actually wrote the film for Jim, which is.
No, that was like the first 2 weeks. I was like, so when did Zach turn this down? Because and by the way, I love Zach Galifianakis crumbs. I love the fact Will Ferrell is too busy to do stuff. But I just assumed, and I'm so grateful that you said that, because I just assumed that they're like, if we could get Zach Galifianakis.
Not only is Richard, I should say, not only is this not a horror story like you said at the beginning, but that Richard is actually seeking comfort to a certain degree from a ghost. I think there's a certain, he wants there to be a ghost a little bit. What is the key to making a ghost story that isn't about scaring people?
I think it would be anyone who's seen anything else I've ever made, which is probably about maybe, if I'm lucky, 3 people in this audience before this film. Oh, thanks. I have a fan. My girlfriend is up here from Tennessee, so maybe that's her. But, you know, I would be incapable of making a horror film. It's just not in my DNA. And, you know, to me, the story was just about, it's about pain. You know, it's about pain and trying to process pain. And we all have that. And you know, on one level, you can look at the ghost stuff in this film as, I wouldn't say like an allegory, but you know, it can work. It can work for people on different levels, and as just sort of a metaphor for other kinds of things, or a symbol of a kind of loss. I mean, we've all dealt with that. There were so many people that worked on this film that had recently gone through a loss of some sort, or had faced potential loss. And I think that informed, it wasn't, you know, there's a lot of attention given to the writer and director of the film for obvious reasons, but this is a movie that a lot of us made, and it was a personal film, not just for me, it was a personal film for a lot of us. And I think that found its way into the film.
I'm going to ask one more question, but we're going to put a microphone right here in this aisle. If anyone has any questions, please don't be shy. This is your last chance to ask a question at this festival. Oh, I guess I should ask this. Like, I believe this does not have a distributor yet. I'm kind of curious. Believe me, we love playing films that don't have it. It actually is a little easier to book them that way. But just tell, like, what are you sort of hoping for in terms of release and a time of year, or next year, or what's the
We're in discussions, and that's all I can say right now. And I wish I could say more, but we're in discussions, and we're looking forward to being able to announce something very soon.
which means that anything positive you guys have to say about it out in the stratosphere, please feel free. It probably
That would
won't
be
hurt.
great. That would actually be
It
great.
probably would do a lot of good, actually. Yes, go right ahead.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm definitely going to be spreading the word about this film. Absolutely tremendous. Really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot for showing it. I was really curious to hear you talk about the passage from Anna Karenina that comes up at the very end. How did that, because it dovetails so nicely with all the other stuff that's going on in the film. Was that sort of a serendipitous thing, like you were just reading Anna Karenina and you felt like, oh, this passage works great in my movie? Or was it something that you had sort of found and socked away and then at a later point realized that it would be a good fit for the story you're telling?
Thank you for the question. I'm glad you responded to the film. Where that came from was, I was familiar with Anna Karenina, and certainly its story of looking at marriage through multiple lenses, you know. But I'm a huge fan of Tolstoy's work, and that sounds like the kind of thing you sit on the stage of at the film festival and talk about, I love Tolstoy, but I really do like Tolstoy a lot. And I freely admit I've never read War and Peace, but I like some of his essays and things like that. And so it was on my mind a little bit. And before I wrote the first draft of the script, I knew there was going to be a passage. I knew that was going to be this moment, the book, pages turning. And so I was looking through, I was searching through different works of literature that I thought might be appropriate for something about waking up. And I hit that passage, and it was like I read that passage, and it was like, this is it, this is the thing. So it was there from the first draft, but it was sort of both and neither of the ways that you were sort of suggesting it might be. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Love the film, thought it was beautiful. I'm really interested in the priest character in the film. I thought I didn't know if you guys met this, you had to have met this, but when he does the sign of the cross, he doesn't say Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He says God, Father, Son, and then does both Holy and Spirit on the left, which is not how you do the thing. And then at the beginning of the movie, He says, and it fits well with the lines, but he says that when Jesus rose from the dead, he was like a ghost. He was a ghost, which Christians emphatically deny. That he was just a ghost, and the whole point is the bodily resurrection. So, were you trying to get at something with this character and say that like he's not a real priest, or he's being a priest in a way that would only apply to ghosts, or
No, this is first. I'll add one more of the inaccuracies, which is I was raised Episcopal. He's an Episcopal priest. I mean, obviously, he's an actor playing an Episcopal priest. We shot this scene in the church, and my mom said after my mom was in the audience as a extra, and she said, "Well, you know, we're supposed to be standing up when they do that part of the service," and I was like, "Why didn't you mention that?" I was like, "Oh yeah, you were the director, you know." It's like, it's been a long time since I've been to church. He does say, he said some people would say Jesus was a ghost, and so he's not saying it himself, I would say, because absolutely, the priest would not necessarily subscribe to that point of view. Where that comes from, why is he the instigator, really, of the story? Part of it is just on a personal level. It was like interesting to sort of, I was raised Episcopal and went to church for the first 18 years of my life, and I'm very ambivalent relationship with organized religion, but the film is about belief and skepticism. It seemed important to have some kind of marker there, some sort of person there to encourage an audience, if you're so predisposed, Christian or not, just in any way sort of say, if you want to look at this in other ways, you're being invited or welcome to do that. And as far as some of that, like the crossing, I do think that was probably just a little bit of a mistake. I'm sorry.
I just also...
Jim, why didn't you fix that?
No, because I barely know it too. That's one of the things that I was really attracted to the script was there is, I think you described it as faith adjacent, but there's also something about this absence of cynicism, and I had just gone through, you'd kind of touched on this, I'd gone through my wife almost dying, and I had seen all my friends that were devout atheists kind of sit there and go, "I'm praying for her," and I'm like, "Well, that's weird." So like there is something about, there's a humanity that, and I actually think it has to do with the geography too, about how Tennessee and is just kind of, there's this openness, and also it's kind of addressed with the paranormal thing, similar to like how there's snake healer kind of preachers, there is the paranormal guy that Sheila kind of works for that's kind of taking advantage of people's kind of interest in the paranormal.
Yeah,
Or is it-
yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know how much of that was cut. But I have never seen the movie. No, I've seen it. But that's, I think that, and we have and that's what was so fun also about is these discussions you have when you do these movies where Paul's tone is very consistent. You should check out his other movies because they're amazing. And some of the discussions of, we live in this era where there is intellectualism and then there is people of faith. And if you embrace intellectualism, you can't be a person of faith. And if you are a person of faith, people view you as non-intellectual. And I think that always hasn't been the case, obviously. And so that's where this movie, I think it kind of weaves this along this line of cynicism that we all have when we start watching this movie. We're kind of like, right, well, obviously there's no ghosts. You know what I mean? Like, let's be realistic here. And then, but everyone in this room has probably at moments been like, I think I saw my grandpa. Do you know what I mean? And it's like we can giggle about it, but we all have our private experiences with some spiritual realm, and that's why I'm running a 6-week course. I know that I'm joking, but there is something, there's a vulnerability and a sincerity that I really responded to in the script, and I think that, you know, that authenticity that Marin brings to her character is so pivotal in carrying this whole movie, where it's like her cynicism, her kind of like, she's like, you know, I had this thing thrust upon me as a child that I've kind of carried, and it's been a burden. I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First off, dope shoes, man. For real.
Right, your
But does acting, are some roles more serious than the others? I mean, in a sense of going into the character? I know a lot of people say that comedy is comedy and then there's serious roles, but isn't all acting serious?
I think it is.
You see what
I
I'm
think
saying?
it's, you know, I think particularly, I think every screenwriter wants you to take the role seriously. I think even the comedic moments are better played when they're played sincere. I don't know, I think it's just also, I feel like some comedies just get sloppy. Do you know what I mean? It's like you get some really funny people and they're improvising, and some of those improvised lines don't necessarily serve the narrative of the story, but they're so funny, so they keep them in.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Gaffigan. I've been a fan
Please
of
call me
yours.
Mr. Sir.
Well, I just wanted to say big fan, and in my early days, before I watched more of your specials, I watched your clips and would view you as just for like comedic advice on how to write jokes back in my days when I was doing stand-up. And after you doing comedy specials and other comedy shows and such, I'm just curious, do you see yourself doing more serious roles in the near future?
Well, if you know, if it's presented, if it's the right role and it's interesting and my wife allows me to do it. No, but if it's, you know, I mean, I'm fortunate enough where I don't have to make a living as an actor, so I can choose the most interesting roles. But it is also, you know, what's also great about indies is they're 2-3 week commitments as opposed to like, you're going to Australia for 6 months. That's where like, you know, which sounds amazing. But that's, you know, like me kind of, you know, being in Knoxville and I can kind of be home here and there is far more appealing. So but to answer your question, it just comes down to the role. And also, you know, the fact that I had seen Paul's work and the fact that my good friend Elizabeth Moss sent me an email.
Thank you.
Hi. I had a question specifically about if you had a reason for making the kids in the film teenagers. You know, they could have been 3-year-olds like my crazy kids or 10, but I personally felt that I loved the contrast between a teenager who was pretty much afraid to be hurt and then these adults who had been hurt, and, you know, just kind of the juxtaposition of that. So I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
No, that's, I mean, I think you just said it. You win. You win the evening. No, I mean, it's very much about, I mean, it goes back to this thing about being open and about her cynicism, Sheila's cynicism, about movie about being open and being vulnerable and being closed off, and she's taught her kid how to be closed off or tried to in an effort to sort of protect him. You know? But yeah, it's very important that I think they're teenagers, and also that he's going to leave at some point, right? You know, and you don't feel that as a parent as strongly until till those years.
Thanks.
I can't tell. I see you there, but I'm telling you, there's like people sort of creeping up behind you. I can't tell if there's a line. We gotta cut. I'm gonna stop it after you three. Okay.
2-1 is really quick. How the heck do you act with it's just, I've always known this, but for some reason it's in my consciousness now, that there are people with boom mics over you and people are doing these, so, but the other question is, where is the anger? I feel like I get that males are more stoic in their grief, but it seems like he's stuck in numbness.
Oh, you mean because his wife was
she's
totally
cheated on
dogged
him.
him.
So I thought
Yeah.
maybe when he saw the plane, he's gonna just, or then the passage is, we are happy now. We, the two of us, we died together.
Oh, that's interesting.
Where's the
But I
anger?
think everyone's been in a relationship where they've just been totally destroyed by that person. And I don't know if it's Kubler-Ross or whatever, but it's like, you particularly, it's similar to like when someone passes away, they become a hero, or we only look at the positive sides. But I think also he was, and we discuss this constantly about their relationship and that how maybe, his wife was, they were a perfect fit as teenagers or in their early 20s, and then they grew apart. He worked at a fish hatchery. Oh wow, they cut off my mic. They're like, that's too much. But the anger, that's a good question, but I think it's also, having almost lost my wife the year before, there is something, I was very kind of, I'd gone through this experience where there is a numbness, and it's also the fact that numbness, I believe, would prompt this priest to try and get him help. So if he was angry, and he had done different things, but there was kind of, I think that Richard was kind of stuck in a place, and that's what I love also about the movie, is that Sheila's damaged and Richard's damaged, and in the end, all humans are kind of repaired by other damaged people. I'm not damaged, you guys are damaged.
Laughter being the best medicine. Thank you.
Really beautiful film, thank you. I was just wondering about the scene when you see the crash and kind of how you approach that. There was so much on your face, and I just wonder what you were thinking he was thinking and feeling, and also if you had different kind of variations on it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we probably, there is something, some of it is, this is reflected in Paul's other films. It's very grounded, it's not melodramatic. Even when we were shooting things, Paul was like, take your time. I'm like a slow-talking Midwesterner. And so normally when I get acting roles, they're like, can you speed it up? But Paul was like, take your time. And so there is something also, in that moment of seeing the crashed plane, I think that in the walk up, I was thinking about what I expected to do. But I also think that people have these grand moments of that lightning's gonna strike when they see the crash site. And the reality is that those moments where lightning strikes are really not that rare. And I think the story of this movie was about setting up, Sheila had brought him up there. He hadn't been kind of like, I gotta see the crash site. But I think the story was set up where, I'm not gonna speak for him, but it was kind of like, yeah, you know what, there aren't ghosts. They're kind of like, there's this realization, there's this sobering that Sheila is very gently bringing Richard through, so that when the pages start turning, you're kind of like, oh my gosh. And so I think that he went up there looking at, I don't remember exactly what I was thinking, but I was, there is something of, he maybe had an expectation that he would have a bigger reaction to it, but he didn't.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll just say something real quick about that too, which is like, one of the first things I think I said to you when and I said this to Marin as well, and I said this to anyone who's working on the film, is that, you know, when you write a script, there's this, I think, this really bad sort of thing out there about like directors. The director should always have the answers, and it's like, I'm writing these characters, and I think there should be some mystery to what they're thinking about, and that's a place for collaboration, where you bring something to it, and then also, to me, it's exciting because I don't know where she went, but like whatever you thought to me is just as valid. You know, it's like that there is something exciting in the filmmaking process about Jim being restrained in that moment, for you to fill that in, for you to be imagining that, and not for me or for Jim to be explaining it to you, and that there's something.
Yeah,
and it's not for and that's not for everyone, but that is a place where some people really can get involved.
All right.
Hi, thank you for being here. I was curious about the occupations that you chose for the two characters. I was thinking like he works at a hatchery, but he never had kids, releasing breeded fish back into the river. And then she was working at a rental car service, and there was the absence of people, but she was dealing with things that they left behind. Can you expand on that?
I think you did a pretty good job of it.
People keep answering your own questions. Come on.
If you have anything else to add.
You know, these are all characters in transition, and those are occupations about transition. They're about being in the case of the fish hatchery in particular, it is about release. And I think that Richard is released at the end. You know, he is released from that pain, and I think that Sheila is too, in her own way. The pains that she can't even talk about in the movie. She can only sort of allude to. But they go to this different place. So I don't want to, you know, it's like that's what's on my mind about it, and I think that the fact that you were there with it and understanding that and thinking about those things is really great.
Was there a different occupation for Richard in a
He
version?
almost worked at a dam.
Yeah,
You should wrap your head around that.
Yeah. Well, my first choice was a fish hatchery, and we weren't sure we were going to be able to get it. And so the second option was that we were going to there was a dam that we were going to use. And this idea of like the release of the water. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just real quick, I don't think Eric mentioned it at the top, but each of you should have received an Audience Choice Ballot. That's the only award we give out. Every new film that we have is eligible, so you can't vote for Alien, sorry. But this one I think is definitely a contender, so please vote. If you didn't get one, we'll give you one on the way out. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming to Chicago and talking about the film. Thanks for sticking around.